Okay, so in this video, I'm going to review the solution to the problem I presented in the previous video, which is let's create a script that's going to loop through all of our DICOM files in a folder and create an HL7 message for those files. So let me show you how I solved this problem. So first, this is our basic script. So some of this stuff we already talked about. So you can see here I'm creating our DICOM. You're going to use our DICOM library. This is the only line really that you need inside process. Up here we initialize it with these variables, and then down here we create our object and we begin using it. So our next step here, number one, I'm going to add a little bit of debugging in here. It's the first time I'm showing you this, but it's best practice to use a try catch. So to do that, we put try at the top. I'm going to indent everything to maintain our indents, and then we're going to do a catch down here at the bottom. And what that's going to do is it's going to catch any exceptions so that we can still do something. We can return some kind of an error for the user. So in this case, I'm going to return false for the script because it doesn't work, and then I'm going to end the try. Now I can make this a little bit more comprehensive by capturing a variable as exception, which is an object type or a data type. And then I can output that in a log line. So in this case, let me copy one of our log lines. So we're going to output something about the script failing, so script error. And then we're going to output EX for the exception, right? That's this variable that we have available. And I'll make the thread type exception. And we'll make it a 2 since this is obviously a pretty serious error. And then we'll return false. Otherwise, we're going to return true. Right? So we return true, meaning that it worked. All right, so what we have right now, we have Ultra DICOM available to us. We already know that we can read through a list of files. I changed to star.dcm, right? So I'm getting all the files in monitor path that have star.dcm, that end with .dcm. And for each one of those files, we're going to loop through. So I'm going to output the the file information. So this we already had. So the next step is we are going to first we output the file name. So next we need to get the contents of that file, right? So because we need the contents of that file for us to work with it in Ultra HL7. So let's take a look at how we're going to do that. Okay, so first we need to open up that file, right? We're going to open up the DICOM file to edit it, right? So we did this before. We have a variable called DCM error, right? We do have to declare that variable though. Let me see if we declared it up here. We did not, so we're going to have to declare that in here. So DCM error. Oh, it is declared. Here we go. So we're declaring DCM error as an integer, and then we're loading that DICOM file. I'm going to add some debug logging. If you recall, we have a variable called debug, and if that's set to true, then I'm going to output that we started Ultra DICOM and that it's successful. Okay. All right. So it'll be a 0 if it's successful. If there's an error message, we'll see an error code there. So next, we're going to check to see if it actually worked, right? So we're going to see if we're going to do an if statement to say, did we actually get a success? And if you recall, DICOM success is just an integer that's 0. We set that up here. All right, so if it's successful, our next step, we're going to do a little bit more debug logging. So with our debug log, we are going to tell the user in our debug log that we're reading in our template. And then we're going to actually read in the template. If you recall, we have a function that we already wrote to read in a text file. So that's going to read in our template. So now that we have this DICOM file open, we're ready to work with it. We're going to read in our HL7 template, which is going to get used to build our HL7 message. And just in case, I'm going to output in debug logging, I'm going to output the contents of that test message. Next, I want to set the MSH header, right, to all the MSH fields, which we talked about before. So I'm going to populate MSH3 with test. I'm going to put a date time in for for the date stamp, the message type. I'm going to use the study instance UID as the control number, which is perfectly valid. I'm going to set the message type to a test and the version to 2.3. Now notice that right here, I'm just setting the control number to the study instance UID, which I'm getting from DICOM, right? So I'm calling get DICOM value to go and get the value of study instance UID, and that's going to populate MSH10. So we have that in place. Then I'm going to output to the screen just so we can see if it worked, right? I'm going to output that message. Okay, so that's going to output our message, and that's a good start, right? So as I'm writing this script, this is about as far as I'm going to go, and I'm going to make sure this is actually working before I write, 150 lines here. I want to make sure that I'm on the right path. So to do that, I am going to restart the service, and I'm going to check our log file. So give me 1 second to restart the service. So the script restarted, and I see here that I have a compile error. It says that each if must end with a matching end if on line 53, and in 71 it says that I have something wrong. It just says end. So I have a little typo. So if I go in here, you can see I have an if here. I forgot to put an if on the end of this one. So we have to stop our service and restart it and see if we start getting a log. So I'm going to keep monitoring this and see if we start getting log entries. And if not, also check over here and see if we get another compile error. Hey, there we go. So we have some log entries here. You can see here it says it found test 2. So this is probably the second iteration. And then this is the original template. And then you can see here it updated the template. There's our date time, the ORM type. There's the UID. It's a test. There's our message type. And then, of course, these we haven't updated yet. So that's our next step, is we have to add code that's going to update the PID segment, PB1, ORC, and OBR. So let's go ahead and give that a try. So I'm going to go back to our script. And next, I'm going to add some code here that, that is going to update the PID segment. So I already wrote this code, so I don't have to type it all for you. But you could do some variation of this. It doesn't have to be exactly the same as mine. But here I'm updating the PID segment. Okay. And while I'm at it, I'm also going to update the PV1 segment. And I'm going to stop here for a second. I'm going to run the script again so you can see what happens. Actually, you know what? I'll put the rest in here, and then I'll go back and show you how to troubleshoot this, because there's going to be a problem here, and I want to show you how I figure it out. So we have our ORC, and then finally I'm going to put in the OBR, where we build that OBR segment. All right. So here's all of our segments, right? So let me save this. Oh, I have to turn off the service to save it sometimes. All right, so now it should build our message all the way up to the OBR, to that last segment. And you can see that I am getting, I'm getting all these values from DICOM header, right? So ORC2 is the accession number. ORC3 is going to be the study instance UID. This is the referring physician in PV1.8, right? Okay, so my next step is to start the service, and let's take a look at our log and see if we get what we need here. So I'm just waiting for the service to start. Okay, so notice what happened here. The last log line we get is PID complete, right? And then it shows me, where it completed the PID segment. And it did work, right? Here's the PID segment. It has everything that we need. It has the ID number. It has the patient's name, the date of birth, the gender. But there's nothing after that. And if we look in our script, here is the last log line, right? The last log line is that the PID is complete. After that, it just stops. So the next thing that's supposed to happen after that log line is this, where it gets the DICOM value of tag 890. Well, that didn't work. It didn't give us the value of tag 890. Nothing happened here. It got to this log line, it just stopped. It didn't do anything. We didn't get an error message. We didn't get any kind of exception. Nothing worked. And if we did get an exception, we should see it because of this log line down here. We should have seen that throw an exception and we would see what went wrong, but it just stopped. This is a weird problem. So I noticed this problem before when I was writing this. I was trying to figure out what causes this problem. And I figured it out. So if I go into, obviously the logs is a good place to start. So I knew that it was, that this line was using Ultra DICOM. So I wanted to check to see if Ultra DICOM had some kind of a log entry. And if we go into our logs, here's Ultra DICOM's error log. And you can see here, in fact, we do have an error log. It says there's error number 800A0183. I have no idea what that means. So I emailed it to development to ask them what that means, and I explained what was happening. So I sent them a copy of the code that I'm using. Right, so I sent them a copy of this function so they can see the function call I'm using, and I also sent them a sample of the DICOM tag that we're trying to work with. And I wanted to show you that as well. This is the DICOM study or the DICOM image that we're trying to process. Let's look at the value of tag 890 and see what it is. So if I scroll through and find 890, take a look. We have 870, 880, and it skips right to 1010. There is no tag 890 in this DICOM header. So the error is because the tag doesn't exist. So what I can surmise from this is that the function that we have from development does not work if we're missing that tag. There should be a way for that to work if we're missing the tag. So hopefully they'll give us a solution to that. And in the meantime, I can get around this error. I'm going to put a new line in where I'm simply going to leave it blank, right? So I'm going to update the referring position to a blank value. And I'm going to comment the line that's not working. And now when I restart the service, it should get all the way through. So now I should see it get all the way to the bottom where everything through the OBR is updated. So let's take a look. Waiting for the service to restart. All right, service restarted. Let's see where we got. We got all the way to, well, it looks like it did the same thing. It got to the PID segment. Let's go back here and take a look. I wonder if I just put the wrong field here. Let's try this. I'm going to set that to PV1 again. I wonder if I hit PVI or something. Let's take a look. Okay, so now it started back up, and you can see that it got all the way through to the OBR segment and it populated it. So I did accidentally have an I here instead of a 1, so that also broke the script when it got to that value. So that needs to be a 1, not PVI. So apparently if we're missing a segment, that also can cause a problem. In any event, so we have, let's continue on here. So now that we know that we're creating that message the way we need it to be created, our next step is to add to output that message, right? So we're going to output that message. So I'm going to put a comment in here that we're outputting the message file. We're going to output it to that. So here's our message, LHL7. We're going to output it to the output path. We're going to call it the file name of the DICOM with .hl7 on the end. So hopefully that'll output our file. And just to give the user some feedback that this is working in our log file, I'm going to go ahead and add a log entry to just let them know that it worked. Now, if for some reason it didn't work, right? So take a look at where I'm putting this else. If for some reason we were not able to initialize that DICOM file, I probably want to put something in the log so that everybody knows that, right? When they're looking at the log file, they'll be able to see that. So here we go. So if it doesn't work, it's going to output that there was a DICOM error on the file, and then it's going to output what the error was. Okay, so we should see an error message if the file is not a valid DICOM file, and for some reason it couldn't initialize the file. All right, so now that we've done that, let's go ahead and restart our service, and we should see something in the output after we restart the service. So this is our output folder, right? So this is where it should write the file when it's done. Our script is running. It looks like it did something here. And I don't see anything on output. I may have deleted it too quick, so let me just start the script again. But according to this, it worked, right? So it ran through this script and did something. Well, let's just try this again. I had deleted this file when I paused the video, so I might have deleted the... There we go. Now it ran. So here we have a HL7 message for each one of these files. So for example, in test 2, here it is. So now we have a pretty normal looking HL7 message, right? Except for this NNN on the end. I used the wrong syntax for that, but you could certainly look up the syntax to get the correct date timestamp. It should include the milliseconds down to 1,000th of a millisecond, of a second, which would be 3 digits, right? So that's it. So that outputted our HL7 message. So we've now written a script that we've combined a few of the skills that we've learned so far. Now we're reading files. We're reading in that template file. We're iterating through files to process them. We are also reading DICOM tags, and we know how to set DICOM tags, but in this case we're reading them. And we also edited an HL7 file, which we learned in the previous video. So we've combined a lot of these different skill sets now. I also added in this script, in this example, I showed you how to add the try catch. That way you could see if there's an error when you're running your script. So if there's some kind of an exception, it should output the exception down here. For example, if you try to reference a null value or something like that. So we have 2 more skills we have to review. In the next 2 skills we have to learn are how to call a command line. So sometimes we have to use the command line to do things from these scripts. We try to use a DLL as much as possible. It's definitely best practice to use DLLs. But if we can't use a DLL and we have a command line instead, some program that we're going to use, I want to show you how to use the command line to do something. And then once we finish that, I'd also like to show you how to use the database. It's going to be the last thing we're going to cover is databases, and I'm going to try to tie this all together for you. So next video, we're going to do command line.